The tribunal hall was unlike anything a human court had ever seen. It was a massive circular chamber floating in orbit above a silent star. Thousands of alien delegates filled the rising rows like a living sea. Scales, feathers, tendrils, and luminous eyes stared down at the center platform. Their voices echoed through translation spheres, creating a low, unsettling hum. At the center stood a single human. Commander Elias Kane was tall, lean, and calm. Chains of glowing energy wrapped around his wrists, but his back was straight. He did not tremble. He did not bow. His dark uniform was torn and scorched from battle, but his gaze was sharp, fixed on the high tribunal. Above him floated a massive ring of light, the verdict halo. When it glowed red, it meant death. The High Arbiter, a towering alien with skin like polished stone, raised a hand. The entire chamber fell silent. No one breathed. The sound of the star outside could almost be felt through the walls. "Commander Elias Kane of Earth," the Arbiter's voice thundered through the hall, translated into every language at once. "You stand accused of crimes against the Galactic Dominion. You led attacks beyond your border. You destroyed fleets that belonged to the Council. You defied our laws." Kane didn't flinch. He simply stared back. The Arbiter leaned closer. "How do you plead?" There was a pause so long that the audience began to shift in their seats. Then slowly, Kane's lips curled into a faint smile. "I plead," he said softly. "Human." The translators struggled for a moment. Whispers spread through the alien delegates like a ripple through water. Some laughed in confusion. Others hissed in anger. The Arbiter's face hardened. "You offer no defense," it said. "I offer you the truth," Kane replied. "You came to our skies." We answered. The halo above him shifted color. From neutral white, it began to pulse dark red. The chamber lights dimmed as if the star itself were holding its breath. When the halo locked into crimson, the sentence was clear. "By the judgment of the tribunal," the Arbiter declared, "you are to be executed, but not here. Not by blade or void or fire. You will face the Deathworld of Varden 9. No creature has survived there. Your death will be seen by the entire galaxy as proof of human limits." Gasps echoed through the chamber. Some aliens clicked their mandibles in excitement. Others muttered, wondering why a simple execution wasn't enough. The Deathworld was known as a living nightmare. Even the most hardened species feared setting foot on it. Kane tilted his head slightly as if he had heard a predictable joke. "You think that will end me?" he said quietly. The guards moved forward. They were towering insectoid creatures with black armor and sharp limbs. Their claws grabbed Kane's arms, pulling him from the center platform, but he didn't resist. He walked on his own. As they passed the audience rows, he glanced upward at the thousands of alien eyes staring down at him. He didn't see fear. He saw certainty. They had already written his end. That made him smile wider. Somewhere in the upper tiers, an alien diplomat whispered to another, "Why does he look like that?" "Humans break before the first day," the other replied. "This one does not know what waits." But Kane knew something they didn't. As the guards escorted him through the long corridor behind the tribunal hall, Kane's mind was racing, but not with panic. He had studied Varden 9. He knew its storms, its terrain, its strange, lethal wildlife. He also knew something the tribunal ignored. Humans had adapted on worse. 2 drones hovered silently above him, recording his every movement. The tribunal planned to broadcast his execution across the galaxy as a warning. Billions would watch him die, Kane whispered to himself, barely moving his lips. Let them watch. They entered a cold hangar where the execution ship waited, a small transport designed to drop prisoners into the Deathworld atmosphere and leave them there. No weapons, no tools. Just a body and a world that wanted to kill it. The guards locked him into a containment pod. Kane felt the restraints tighten, the hum of engines growing beneath him. Through the transparent window, he could still see the stars. In the observation tower above, the Arbiter and other high-ranking officials watched. Within hours, one said, he will be gone. Humans are fragile, another agreed. This will be quick. But the Arbiter kept watching Kane. Something about the human's eyes bothered it. Most prisoners screamed. Some fainted. This one was calculating. Kane closed his eyes, breathing slow and steady. He wasn't thinking about death. He was thinking about the terrain, the sky, the storm patterns he'd studied. He was thinking about how to survive the first hour, the hour no one had ever lived through. The pod door sealed with a deep thud. The lights dimmed. The countdown began. Drop sequence initiated. A mechanical voice announced in several alien tongues. The Tribunal's broadcast satellites locked onto the Deathworld coordinates. Billions of alien viewers tuned in. Commentators began to speak, predicting how long the human would last. Some said 15 minutes. Some said less. No one said more. Kane's last sight before launch was the Arbiter's face on the screen. It looked down at him like a god passing judgment. Kane smiled once more. "Let's see," he whispered. "If your Deathworld can handle me." The engines roared. The pod launched like a burning meteor toward the black planet below. Inside the Tribunal Hall, thousands leaned forward to watch. None of them knew that the execution they just set in motion would change the galaxy forever. The pod entered the atmosphere like a blazing spear. Flames wrapped around its shell as it cut through layers of black clouds. The Deathworld stretched below like a living nightmare. Its surface was cracked and twisted. Giant storms circled in endless loops. Rivers of strange glowing liquid flowed through jagged valleys. No signs of cities, no signs of mercy. Inside, Commander Kane held onto the straps as the pod shook violently. Warning lights flashed red. The temperature climbed fast. But Kane stayed calm. He had trained for worse landings during Earth's deep space missions. This was just another drop. Outside the pod, the wind screamed like a living creature. When the pod finally hit the ground, it didn't land. It slammed. Metal bent, panels cracked. For a few seconds, everything was silent except for the hiss of cooling metal. Then the restraints released. Kane pushed the door open and stepped onto the alien soil. The air hit him like acid mist. It burned his throat and made his eyes water. The sky above was a swirling dark gray with flashes of green lightning inside the clouds. Far in the distance, he could see moving shapes, large, crawling, almost serpentine. The planet itself seemed alive. Above him, tiny surveillance drones hovered, blinking red. The Tribunal was watching. The entire galaxy was watching. Kane looked up at the drones and smirked. "Showtime," he muttered. The first priority was shelter. He scanned the surroundings. There were sharp rock formations to the east, a dark forest of twisted plants to the west, and open plains in between. The plains looked easy to cross, but easy meant exposed. He headed for the rocks. He carried nothing but the clothes on his back and a few pieces of broken panel he ripped from the pod. He turned one into a makeshift blade by sharpening the edge on a rock. He broke another panel to use as a shield. Simple, effective. As he moved toward the rocks, the ground beneath his feet suddenly cracked. Something beneath was moving. A second later, a massive creature burst out. It looked like a cross between a centipede and a crocodile, long, armored, and fast. Its mouth opened wide, showing layers of teeth that dripped glowing venom. The galaxy's commentators began their usual predictions. "This is it," one alien voice said through the Tribunal's broadcast. "The human will die in minutes." Kane didn't run blindly. He moved sideways, watching the creature's movements carefully. It lunged fast, but he rolled to the side, jamming the sharpened panel into one of its joint segments. The creature screeched, thrashing. Kane grabbed a piece of broken terrain and smashed it against the wound, forcing the blade deeper. Green blood sprayed across the ground, sizzling like acid. He backed away as the creature writhed. It wasn't dead, but it was injured. And more importantly, Kane understood something. These creatures were aggressive, but their armor had weak points. The drones captured every second of it. Billions of viewers leaned closer to their screens. Whispers spread across alien networks. He heard it. Humans shouldn't be able to fight that thing. Kane didn't waste time celebrating. He moved deeper into the rock formations, climbing into a narrow crevice where larger predators couldn't follow. He began to build a crude shelter using rocks and broken pod parts. He blocked the entrance with spiked sticks from nearby twisted plants. He didn't know if it would hold, but it was a start. As night began to fall, the Deathworld revealed its next horror. The sky darkened completely, and glowing insect-like creatures emerged in swarms. They didn't attack him directly. They were attracted to heat. His pod's smoking wreckage drew them in, and they swirled around it like a living storm. Kane watched quietly from his rocky shelter. The insects covered the pod completely. Within minutes, the metal shell melted under their acidic swarms. The message was clear. If he had stayed there, he would have been dissolved alive. Inside the tribunal chamber, the High Arbiter leaned forward. "He is adapting," it said in a low voice. Other alien leaders exchanged nervous looks. "It's only the first night," one replied. "He won't last longer." But already the first reports were spreading through the galactic net. Millions of viewers were sharing clips of the fight. A few alien commentators even called him the human beast. His calm, calculated movements confused many. Most prisoners screamed in fear on Deathworld. This one had built a shelter and wounded a creature in less than an hour. As darkness deepened, Kane studied the terrain from the crack in his shelter. He observed how the glowing insects moved in predictable waves. He noticed how the centipede creatures avoided certain glowing plants. He wasn't just surviving, he was learning. He muttered softly, "If the world wants to kill me, I'll make it work for me." Lightning flashed in the sky. A massive storm was building. The wind howled through the rocks like a ghost. Rain began to fall, thick, green, and acidic. It hissed as it touched the ground, burning holes into the soil. But Kane was safe in his crevice. He adjusted the rocks above his head, creating a tighter roof. Up in orbit, the tribunal broadcast commentators began to argue live. "He's lucky," one said. "He's human," another answered. "That's worse." Back on the ground, Kane didn't sleep. He watched. He planned. He scratched rough maps onto the rock with a shard of metal, marking where the insects swarmed and where the predators emerged. This wasn't an execution ground anymore. This was a battlefield, and he was already preparing for the next day. As dawn approached, the acidic rain stopped. The ground smoked. Distant roars echoed across the landscape. Kane stood, stretching his sore arms. His shelter had held through the night. He had food to find, weapons to build, and terrain to claim. Above him, the drones hovered, recording every move. Millions more tuned in. Alien forms exploded with debates. Some admired him. Some hated him. Some were afraid. In the tribunal hall, the Arbiter stared at the live feed. This was supposed to be a death sentence, it said slowly, not entertainment. But deep down, something in its voice sounded uncertain. Kane stepped out of his shelter, blade in hand, scanning the horizon. The Deathworld had survived many before him, but it had never met a human like him. The hunt had begun. Far above the Deathworld, the tribunal hall was alive with noise. Delegates crowded around floating holoscreens, their alien eyes fixed on the human below. What was meant to be a short execution had turned into a galactic spectacle. Every movement of Commander Kane was being broadcast live across dozens of star systems. The High Arbiter sat on its elevated throne, silent. It watched Kane's shelter, the crude blade, the drawn map on the rocks. None of this made sense. "How long has he survived?" the Arbiter asked a technician. 21 standard hours, the technician replied. "No previous prisoner has lasted more than 8. A murmur spread across the chamber. Some delegates shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned forward with growing interest. The broadcast viewership had already tripled overnight. Traders were selling feeds to entertainment networks. Commentators had given Kane nicknames: the Iron Human, the Deathworld Wanderer, the one who fights back. In a shadowed corner, a tall insectoid diplomat clicked his mandibles in frustration. "This was supposed to be an example," he hissed. "Now he's becoming a symbol." The Arbiter didn't reply. It stared at Kane's calm face on the screen. Something about the human's eyes made it uneasy. It had seen fear, anger, desperation, but this was different. It was focus. Down on the surface, dawn broke through the swirling clouds. The sky turned a sickly green. Kane climbed to the top of a rock spire to get a better view of the terrain. From up high, he spotted distant ruins, dark shapes half buried in the earth far beyond the plains. That was unusual. The Deathworld was said to be empty, wild, untouched. But something built those structures long ago. He noted the direction carefully on his scratched rock map. Reaching them could take a day, maybe more. But he needed resources, and ruins meant potential tools or information. Before moving out, he worked on improving his shelter. He reinforced the entrance with thorned vines that oozed a sticky, acidic sap. He used sharp bones from the injured centipede creature as spikes along the path. Everything had a purpose. Above him, the drones buzzed softly. Kane glanced at them, then at the sky. He had noticed their transmission lights the night before. Their blinking pattern wasn't random. He tapped the rock with his blade in slow rhythm. Short, short, long, long. Morse code. A human pattern. He wasn't sure if anyone from Earth was watching yet, but he knew this. Drones were signals. Signals could be hijacked. In the tribunal hall, a technician frowned. "Sir, the human is producing rhythmic sounds." "Why would he do that?" another asked. The arbiter leaned forward. "Record it. Translate it," the code continued. "Oh, yes." Meanwhile, Kane left his shelter behind, marking the path with hidden signs only he could understand. He moved carefully, using terrain to avoid open spaces. The Deathworld wasn't just dangerous because of predators. It was unpredictable. The ground shifted. The winds changed direction without warning, and strange clicking noises echoed from underground. Hours into his journey, a massive storm began to build. Black clouds rolled over the plains, carrying acid rain and violent winds. Kane ran toward a cluster of boulders, using his shield panel to protect his head. The drones followed, struggling to stay steady in the wind. When the rain hit, it burned through anything unprotected. Kane ducked under the rocks, wrapping his arms tightly around his body. He waited there, breathing slowly until the storm passed. The ground steamed as the acidic rain evaporated, leaving black scars in the soil. Back in the tribunal hall, viewership hit a record number. Commentators spoke excitedly about the human's tactics. "He is reading the world," one alien analyst said. "He adapts faster than any species we have sentenced." "This is dangerous," another interrupted. "If others start to believe humans are unstoppable, our control will weaken." A smaller delegate with translucent skin and glowing veins turned to the arbiter. "Perhaps we should end the transmission." "Cut the broadcast." The arbiter's stone-like face cracked slightly in thought. Ending the broadcast would make them look weak. But letting it continue was giving Kane influence. Billions were watching a single human defy death. Not yet, the arbiter decided. Let them watch. His death will be more meaningful when hope turns to despair. On the Deathworld, Kane finally reached the edge of the ruins. They were ancient, towers broken in half, metallic walls covered in strange markings. The air was colder here. He entered slowly, blade in hand, eyes scanning every corner. Inside one ruined structure, he found something unexpected. Metal containers, still sealed. The writing wasn't human, but the construction looked military. Maybe this planet had been used before as some kind of station. Kane pried open one of the containers with his makeshift blade. Inside, he found energy cells, corroded but not dead. With the right modifications, he could use these for power, or to send a stronger signal. The drones recorded every move. In orbit, technicians zoomed in on the energy cells. "Those are restricted relics," one whispered. "How did they survive this long?" "He's scavenging military tech," another replied nervously. The arbiter's eyes narrowed. "If he powers those cells, he can send a message off-world." One delegate laughed. "A message to who?" "No one will help him." But the arbiter wasn't so sure. The pattern of his actions, the code, the calmness, this wasn't random. This was strategy. Night returned to the Deathworld, bringing its chorus of distant roars and glowing insects. Kane climbed onto a tower's broken roof to get a clear view of the stars. Somewhere out there, Earth was listening, or at least he hoped. He began using one of the energy cells to power a drone he had captured earlier. He stripped its casing, rewired its circuits, and started experimenting with its transmission unit. Sparks flew and his hands burned, but he kept working. Above him, the drone still filming didn't interfere. They only observed. From orbit, technicians watched his strange work. "What is he doing?" one asked. "He's modifying the drone," another answered slowly. "I think he's trying to control it." The arbiter stood. For the first time, its voice carried unease. "A single human, on a Deathworld, is rewriting the rules." The hall grew silent. Back on the planet, Kane finished his work. He held the modified drone in his hand. Its light blinked not in the tribunal pattern, but in his own code. Short, long, short, a new rhythm. He looked up at the night sky, breathing slowly. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was speaking. The night was cold on the Deathworld. Strange winds moved through the broken ruins like whispers. Kane sat on the cracked rooftop of the ancient tower, watching his modified drone hover in front of him. Its small light blinked in a new pattern, one that no tribunal technician had programmed. Short, long, short, over and over. This was not random survival anymore. This was communication. Kane had stripped the drone's transmitter and redirected its signal. It no longer fed information only to the Tribunal's satellites. Instead, part of the transmission now pointed outward into deep space. Somewhere far away in the dark, that signal would spread, and if Earth's fleets were listening, they would understand. In the Galactic Tribunal Hall, tension grew with each passing hour. Delegates crowded around the main viewing screens, watching the humans' every move. "He has modified one of the surveillance drones," a technician reported nervously. The High Arbiter turned its stone-like face slowly. "Modified?" "Yes, the signal is splitting. We don't know what message he's sending." Panic rippled through the lower rows. Some delegates demanded the broadcast be cut. Others wanted orbital drones to destroy him immediately. But the Arbiter hesitated. If they acted too openly, the galaxy would see them as afraid. Billions were watching the broadcast. Kane had become a symbol of defiance whether they liked it or not. "Let him play his game," the Arbiter said slowly. "Deathworld will break him before his message ever reaches anyone." On the planet's surface, Kane moved deeper into the ruins. His eyes scanned walls covered in strange alien runes. He wasn't a linguist, but he understood technology. This place had once been a forward base. Power nodes were buried in the structure. Some still hummed faintly when he touched them. He worked for hours connecting pieces, broken energy cells, stripped drone parts, metal shards from the centipede creature's armor. His hands were cut and burned, but he kept working with silent focus. By dawn, he had built a small perimeter trap around the ruins. Sharp stakes hidden under sand, signal wires tied to vines that could snap and release acidic fluids, and energy cells rigged to burst. The Deathworld was dangerous. Kane decided to make it dangerous for everything else, too. Just before noon, the first threat came. From the edge of the ruins, massive winged predators emerged. Their bodies were sleek, covered in tough, scale-like plates. Their heads had two jaws. They were fast, silent, and clearly hunting. The drones captured the moment in perfect detail. Kane heard the low, fluttering sound. He stayed low behind broken walls. 3 predators swooped down at once, circling. When the first one dove, he didn't run. He stood still, holding a piece of reflective metal. At the last second, he angled it toward the sun. The bright flash startled the creature, sending it into his spiked trap. It screamed as the stakes pierced its wings. The second dove from the side. Kane rolled behind a wall and hit a switch. One of the energy cells exploded, spraying hot shrapnel into the air. The creature crashed into the ruins, wounded but still alive. The third circled cautiously. Kane moved fast. He picked up his makeshift blade and charged straight toward the wounded second predator. With brutal precision, he stabbed the soft tissue under its jaw. It collapsed with a gurgling sound. Billions of viewers across the galaxy watched in silence. The human wasn't just surviving anymore, he was fighting back. In orbit, the Tribunal Hall was filled with shock. Some alien commentators were speechless. Others began debating live. "This is no longer a punishment," one said. "This is a demonstration." The Arbiter slammed its hand on the table, making the chamber tremble. "He is one human," it roared. "One. Are you all so easily impressed?" But even the Arbiter couldn't ignore what it was seeing. Kane had turned the ruins into a base. He had traps. He had communication. And now he had killed Deathworld predators in front of billions. On the planet, the fight wasn't over. The injured first predator tried to drag itself out of the trap, but Kane walked toward it slowly, blade in hand. The creature hissed, thrashing. He stared into its glowing eyes without fear, then finished it cleanly. He didn't enjoy the kill, but he understood something critical. The creatures feared fire and sound. He collected bones, teeth, and pieces of their wings. He used these materials to strengthen his weapons and armor. By evening, Kane looked less like a prisoner and more like a warrior. The drones hovered silently above, watching as he lit controlled fires around the ruins. The flames didn't spread far, but the smoke rose like a signal into the alien sky. That night, deep within the ruins, Kane activated his modified drone once again. This time the message was longer. He transmitted coordinates, short-coded phrases, and rhythmic beeps that only human intelligence could recognize. If Earth received it, they would know exactly where he was. Far away, beyond the Tribunal's sensors, a silent ship floating in deep space caught a faint signal. Its computers translated the rhythmic message instantly. "This is Commander Elias Kane, Varden 9, alive, hostile terrain. Tribunal signal compromised, Earth. It's time." The Black Fleet had heard him. Meanwhile, in the tribunal hall, alarms suddenly flashed on the signal board. A secondary signal has left the planet's atmosphere. A technician shouted, "What?" The arbiter barked. "Where did it go?" "We don't know. It didn't go to our satellites. It's gone into deep space." A heavy silence fell over the hall. Delegates exchanged worried looks. The arbiter's hands tightened. "Trace it, now." But deep space was too vast, and Earth's listening posts were too well hidden. The tribunal realized something too late. The execution was no longer just a punishment. It had become a battlefront. Back on the Deathworld, the night sky lit up with a strange storm. The winds howled, the insects swarmed, and predators circled the edge of the ruins, but they did not come closer. The traps and fires had changed the environment. For the first time, Kane had control over a part of the Deathworld. He stood at the top of the ruined tower, wind whipping his torn uniform, face lit by firelight. Above him, the drones floated like silent witnesses. He stared at the sky and whispered, "Your Deathworld isn't mine anymore." The galaxy was watching, and the tables had started to turn. Far across the dark of space, in a quiet sector where no tribunal sensors could see, a massive black vessel floated like a shadow among the stars. It carried no bright lights, no broadcast signals. It was part of Earth's Black Fleet, the hidden armada that the galaxy only whispered about. Inside its command deck, silent alarms began to flash red. Operators rushed to their stations. On the main screen, a rhythmic pattern played over and over again. Short, long, short. Coordinates followed. Message verified. "This is Commander Elias Kane. Varden 9. Alive. Tribunal signal compromised. Requesting response." The fleet commander, a woman with steel-gray eyes, leaned forward. "He's alive," she said. Her voice carried both pride and fury. "And he's on their execution world." Orders were sent through encrypted channels. Across the void, other Black Fleet ships began to change course. Quiet engines powered up. Hidden weapon arrays came online. Humanity had heard the call. And humanity never left one of its own behind. Up in the Galactic Tribunal hall, chaos was building. The technicians still couldn't trace where the human signal had gone. Some believed it was a meaningless broadcast. Others feared the worst. The High Arbiter slammed its hand on the table, silencing the room. "This is a death sentence," it growled. "Not a war." An insectoid delegate clicked nervously. "Then why does it feel like war is coming?" The broadcast feeds from the Deathworld showed Kane moving like a man who already knew help was on its way. He strengthened traps, built stronger barriers, and dragged the carcasses of dead predators to create warning walls around his base. At night, he stood on the tower and stared at the sky, calm and focused, as if waiting for something. Viewership across the galaxy reached record numbers. Millions of aliens stayed awake through their planetary nights just to watch him. Some whispered their support. Others feared what would happen next. A few began to question the tribunal's authority. On the Deathworld, Kane's transformation continued. He used the glowing fluids of the slain predators to coat his blade, turning it into a weapon that could cut through tougher armor. He turned parts of the drones into early warning sensors, placing them along the outskirts of the ruins. When another pack of centipede-like beasts came in the night, his alarms triggered early. He didn't fight them in the open. Instead, he guided them straight into his traps. Explosions shook the ruins. The drones captured everything: the precision, the control, the cold efficiency. This wasn't chaos anymore. This was military strategy. Meanwhile, Earth's Black Fleet was approaching tribunal space under cloak. Their ships were angular, dark, and built for silent war. Their communication lines remained closed. Only a few signals pulsed between them. Coordinates, timing, attack paths. The fleet commander stood in front of a massive holo display. "The tribunal thinks they're untouchable," she said. "They put him on a Deathworld to make an example. Instead, he's the example we'll send back to them." Her second-in-command nodded. "When do we move?" "When they least expect it," she answered. Inside the tribunal hall, debates turned into shouting. Some demanded that Kane be eliminated immediately with orbital strikes. Others warned that killing him too soon would make him a martyr. The Arbiter listened to it all in cold silence. One young delegate spoke up. "High Arbiter, the galaxy is watching. If we destroy him now, people will see fear. If we let him live, they'll see weakness." The Arbiter's face was hard. "Then we will show neither." We will send the hunters. A hush fell over the hall. The hunters were elite executioners, bioengineered soldiers designed to end impossible situations. They had never failed. Orders were given. A small stealth ship detached from the Tribunal fleet and headed toward Varden 9. Kane noticed it first. His modified drone picked up a strange heat signature above the clouds. He stared up at the sky. This was no storm. Something was coming. He began preparing the ruins like a battlefield. He repositioned his spikes, set new traps, checked every wall. He didn't know what kind of enemy was on its way, but he knew it wouldn't be ordinary. As the sun burned through the green sky, 3 hunter pods dropped from orbit, cutting through the air like silent knives. They landed in the plains outside the ruins. The doors opened and tall figures stepped out. They were humanoid but taller than any human, covered in black organic armor. Their movements were precise like machines with flesh. The drones caught the moment. Billions watched in silence. In the tribunal hall, the arbiter watched with cold satisfaction. "Let's see if he smiles now," it said. But down on the surface, Kane wasn't afraid. He crouched behind the broken wall of the tower, watching the hunters move. He recognized their formations. They weren't wild beasts. They were soldiers, and soldiers could be outthought. The first hunter entered the ruins. It triggered a hidden wire. A wall of sharpened spikes swung down, piercing its chest. It fell with a heavy thud. The second advanced, analyzing the traps, destroying some as it moved. Kane waited until it reached the center courtyard, then set off a chained explosion. Acid sprayed in all directions. The hunter staggered, armor melting. The third came from above, climbing the tower walls like a spider. Kane turned, blade ready. The two collided on the rooftop, sparks flying. The hunter was strong, stronger than him, but it wasn't human. It didn't adapt fast. Kane rolled away from its claws, slashing its joints where armor was weakest. The creature lunged again, but he ducked low and drove the blade into its throat. The rooftop battle was fast, brutal, and silent. In the end, Kane stood over the fallen hunter, chest heaving, eyes blazing. Billions of aliens watching the live broadcast gasped. 1 human, 3 hunters, all dead. At that exact moment, far in the dark, Earth's Black Fleet arrived at the edge of Tribunal space. Their engines flared silently. The fleet commander stared at the star map. "He's still alive," she said. "He's holding the line alone." She turned to her officers. "Not anymore. Let's bring him home." In the tribunal hall, alarms began to sound. "Unidentified fleet approaching!" A technician cried. The arbiter rose slowly. "Who?" The answer came a second later. "Earth." Panic spread like fire through the chamber. On the Deathworld, Kane stood on the tower rooftop again, bloodied but unbroken. He stared at the stars as if he could already feel their presence out there. He whispered, "Welcome, brothers." The game had changed. Humanity was on its way. The stars above the Deathworld began to glow with movement. Far beyond the planet's orbit, dark shapes slipped out of the void, their hulls reflecting no light. The Black Fleet had arrived. At first, the Tribunal's orbital sensors caught nothing. Then suddenly, entire fleets appeared on their screens like ghosts tearing through a curtain. Hundreds of Earth warships formed a tight formation, their engines burning silently. They didn't broadcast warnings. They didn't declare their presence. They were simply there. In the tribunal hall, chaos exploded. Technicians shouted reports. Delegates screamed in a dozen languages. "They shouldn't be able to get this close," one cried. "Where are our early warning systems?" The High Arbiter slammed its hands on the glowing table. "They are humans," it growled. They were never loud. They were waiting. Panic spread like a storm. For the first time in centuries, the tribunal faced a fleet it hadn't summoned. The Black Fleet's presence wasn't a message. It was a verdict. On the Deathworld, Kane stood on the tower rooftop looking up at the sky. A faint smile crossed his tired, dirt-streaked face. He didn't need a communicator to know what those shadows meant. "They came," he whispered. Below, the ruins were littered with the remains of hunters and predators. His trap still smoked. Fire still burned, and above him, the drones hovered, still transmitting everything to the galaxy. Billions were watching this moment live. They had witnessed the human fight. Now they would witness what happens when humanity answers. The tribunal fleet scrambled into formation around the planet. Their ships were larger but slower. designed for intimidation, not speed. Black Fleet ships moved like silent knives spreading across orbital layers, locking onto enemy systems with precision. On the Black Fleet's flagship, Commander Imani stood tall. "Open a channel," she ordered. A brief pulse was sent, encrypted, sharp, and impossible to ignore. It was a single sentence. "Return our soldier." The tribunal received it loud and clear. No threats, no explanations, just an order. The Arbiter's face twisted. "They dare—" Before it could finish, the Black Fleet disabled half of their orbital defenses without firing a single shot. They used targeted EMP bursts and precision hacking, shutting down shields and communications in seconds. One by one, tribunal ships went dark. Delegates in the hall stared at the screens in disbelief. "They're not attacking," one whispered. "They're controlling us." The Arbiter's hands shook for the first time. Down on the Deathworld, 3 sleek black dropships entered the atmosphere. They descended through the acid clouds like falling daggers, engines roaring low. Kane stepped back as they landed near the ruins. Their ramps lowered, revealing armored human soldiers with glowing visors. They moved with practiced precision, weapons raised, scanning the perimeter. One of them approached Kane. "Commander Elias Kane?" the soldier asked through a speaker. Kane stood tall, covered in dirt, blood, and predator markings. "Reporting alive," he said. His voice was calm. "Deathworld didn't get me." The soldiers exchanged glances, a mix of respect and disbelief. They handed him a clean weapon and armor. He took it without hesitation. As they secured the area, one soldier muttered, "Sir, the whole galaxy's been watching you." Kane didn't answer. He simply looked up at the sky, where human warships now outshone the stars. In orbit, the tribunal received a second message. "Prepare the prisoner for transfer." "You have 10 minutes. The Arbiter tried to stall. "This is tribunal territory. You have no authority here." The Black Fleet responded by silencing their planetary command with a single burst. The lights in the tribunal hall flickered. Screens went black. All external systems were suddenly under human control. In the darkness, a cold human voice echoed through every speaker in the hall. "You sentenced one of us. Now we pass judgment." Minutes later, a human warship descended into low orbit over the tribunal station. It released a single gravity tether, pulling Kane's dropship from the Deathworld's surface up toward space. As the ship ascended, the drones followed, still streaming everything. Billions watched as the man they had expected to die rose from the planet like a figure out of myth. Inside the tribunal hall, silence fell. Every delegate watched the giant screens where Kane's image filled the room. He stood in the dropship's open hatch, looking down at the planet he had conquered and the tribunal that had tried to break him. For the first time, the prisoner looked down at the judges. The Arbiter spoke finally, voice low. "What happens now?" A nearby delegate whispered the answer. "Judgment has reversed." Kane was escorted onto the Black Fleet flagship. When he entered the command deck, the crew stood and saluted. Commander Imani met him at the center platform. "You did more than survive," she said. "You made them watch." Kane nodded slowly. "The galaxy saw what one human could do. Imagine what happens when we all arrive." She smiled faintly. "They're already imagining." Moments later, the Black Fleet positioned itself directly over the tribunal's central station. They didn't fire. They didn't invade. They simply hovered, engines burning silently, casting massive shadows over the structure. It was a clear message to the galaxy. You sentenced one human. Now the galaxy has witnessed what humanity truly is. Across countless worlds, alien citizens talked in whispers. Some feared humanity more than ever. Others admired their courage. A few began questioning the tribunal's power openly. The story of the Deathworld would not be forgotten. In the tribunal hall, the Arbiter stood alone after the delegates left. The broadcast screens replayed images of Kane's fight, his traps, the moment he killed the hunters, and finally his ascent into the sky. The Arbiter stared for a long time before speaking to itself. "We thought we were showing their limits," it muttered. "Instead, they showed us ours." On board the flagship, Kane stood by the observation window. Below, the Deathworld slowly turned in silence. Around him, Earth's fleet moved like shadows in the dark. He touched the glass with one hand. "You called this my execution," he whispered. But it was your lesson." The Black Fleet turned slowly, engines igniting, leaving the tribunal's territory behind. The galaxy watched as the fleet disappeared into deep space. taking with it the man who turned a death sentence into a legend.